Okay, I have one question in common for those three presenters, and I found out some impressions in common for those three different types of artwork. This year, actually, we have a good diversity for those brilliant 15 awarded work, and today's top 3 work is also have good diversity, and one is very good network-based, but very smooth, ironic interface work, and the other is also networking work and crowdsourcing work, very nice platform for the people. And the last one is very nice, beautiful, amazingly beautiful physical installation, but open source platform for the people. So those three have a same character in common. And maybe you all three would like to sharing the information by the unique platform made by yourselves. So I'd like to ask one common question for those three, and the question is, what was the difficulty in the past to developing your current project, and how is your thought about this area, interactive art, for yourself or your younger generation and in your future? So can I ask the first, to Oriba?
Well, the difficulty was to imagine what the effect that the project that we've been thinking of, the effect that it will yield at the very end once deployed. And indeed, as an interactive project, or as Ars Electronica positioned it as being an interactive project, it's the interesting fact about it is that the interaction doesn't happen with the device itself. Interaction happens with a remote computer, with a computer which is being eventually affected by our project, and it is of course at first might not seem to be an interactive project per se. However, I think it reaches out further than a classic understanding of interactive art, and in fact we are very grateful for Ars Electronica for the recognition of this type of work that we presented here.
I wanted to mention that that the News Tweak is working in this room. You just saw, for instance, that I've become Danja Vasiliev. So it's brilliant, actually. I mean, this is a new version where the video itself can be modified. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it works. Yeah. Great. Thanks. Yeah, no, I'll speak as Danja. I mean, growing up in St. Petersburg, for instance, was certainly a challenge as a young engineer and artist, and there's with few resources at the no. Oh, good. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, I think that regarding communicating to a younger generation of practitioners. One of the things that's really important to us is to emphasize a very critical relationship to an increased dependency on technology as a whole. And we frame this under the banner of critical engineering, passing that on in the form of mere demonstration isn't enough. The actual deployment itself isn't enough. It needs to be unpacked in the form of source code that can actually be studied and respected in an engineering space as much as in the actual more performative space itself. You can put it really simply, with the increased ubiquity of technology in our lives, and its deep reach into our lives, comes increased dependence and simultaneously increased ignorance. And this is a vulnerability of sorts. And one way to unpack it is to actually tackle the language of engineering on face value, actually really look at what is defining this dependence and how it is how it engineers us. Yeah, that's one other way.
Thank you. You're so successful, so that's good advice for the younger generation. Thank you. So how about you?
Well, it's really interesting that is inside the category of interactive art, because actually it was pretty participative and interactive because of all this reaction from the media, and especially reaction from the user, the Facebook users that wrote us, and as well as interactive with the Facebook lawyers and try to figure out if what we did was legal or illegal, and also questioning how we can interact with this power structure as Facebook that is such of unquestionable structure that people give a lot of trust in it. And as well the new generation that they don't even they care even less than us when they post all their data, since they are really young and they don't have enough critics about this kind of monopolism of ownership of data. And so this interactive part of like anyone can face a big corporation and provoking them and raising question is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would only like to add that for all the three projects, what we were looking for was a process that can eventually be done even without the massive scale that we applied. So for us, I mean, for me, it has been easy to communicate to students, for example, because it's something that on a smaller scale can be done by anybody. So the core idea can be easily communicated, and that's quite important. And I think we also fit into something which is not really very explored, which is an underlying thing of being uncomfortable with the sort of pushed adoption of some platforms. I mean, specifically on Facebook, you get on Facebook because your friends do. So you are quite pushed without even having the time of thinking if it's okay or good or you're happy about that. So starting to corrupt this kind of instinctual following was also important, especially for younger generation, I mean.
So I'm curious about our work. Is not it's a very private artwork, I think. So it's not social things. So the rest as the works is very social. I think I talked about with Japanese artists yesterday about. It's very different, quite different with, in Europe and Japan. It's a art piece is so different. So how I don't know why Japan is so quite unique, or I don't know, but I'm very interested in the difference of the European and the Japan.
Yes, I also think about that. Your piece is more critical, really critical for like a society stuff, but ours are more private things. And I also wondering, did you think about apply hybrid art? So why you choose interactive art? I think there is two options for your works, maybe. So I like to ask you, you choose.
Maybe there's also digital communities if we want, so then we get completely lost in Ars Electronica categories. But we only had to choose one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we talked a lot about it, Danja and I. We were really You know, we could have thrown it into the hybrid art category, for instance, but you can think of Newsweek very much as a screen-based work, as we said in the talk. We're interacting with other people's screens. You know, one is transforming experiences. One can even look at it as a platform for designing experience. You know, or something like that. It's not necessarily intrinsically outside of the scope of interactive art. But we also thought it might be hilarious or interesting and in many ways provocative to just have a go. I mean, imagine if it could make its way into the interactive art category and get something of a prize or even a slot in the exhibition. It might ask for a reinvigoration or reinvestigation of what interaction design really is, or interactivity is almost becoming formalized in a certain kind of screen-based frame, you know. It's formalized. This idea that you're standing in front of a projection or in front of a screen, or, yeah.
Well, if you imagine the internet as a street, for instance, compare it to a street, what Newsweek does, it changes the way people interact with each other and with the news resources, with another servers on the internet. So in fact, it is a modification of the interaction model, which we are also accustomed with. And then it's not so strange that we put ourselves into this box of interaction art, when in fact what we do is modification of a familiar interaction model, I think. And yeah, I think that's the main reason behind our decision, which might not seem so obvious first.
In our cases, it would maybe help to expand the very classical definition of user experience.
Oh, thank you so much. So the one point from the question of Ishibashi-san has, I myself has some feeling for last 10 years. There are big difference also between Japanese work and European work and other countries' work. That is the difference of the social background. And we Japanese people can concentrate into our own technology inside our body or the soul. So the treatment of the technology is totally different from any other country. That is my opinion once. And for the category, difference of the category, and I also feel the change of the interactivity for those 10 years or so. And gradually the meaning and the conditions and the true value of the interactivity is gradually changed. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And maybe next decade, there are a lot of hybrid, so-called hybrid work who are trying to beyond the border of each category, and both will do for the hybrid art and the interactive art. And I think that's a wonderful situation to sharing that kind of platform and the data and information and the purpose of the creativity. So I think that's a good situation. That is my comment. And how many times we have? So I'd like to take some question and answer, 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So is there any question? Okay.
Hello. I was going to address this to Julian. No, I'm sorry, Julian over there. Okay. A couple of years ago, I think in this very same room, we had another Julian that was not too far away from you, and distance-wise, I think, living, or at least from the country. And he's now in Britain, and apparently I think he's in Britain in a house. So for, I think, 4 out of the 6 of you, I think the concern is, do you have any concerns when it comes to subversion, I guess, of what you're doing, I guess? Do you have any, I mean, I know that there's already some legal things that have been going on. We've heard about some of that. But I hate to see that in 2 years something happens to one of you guys, you know, and you know, where it's really intense and we don't see you on the stage. So I was just wondering if any of you had that feeling.
I mean, yeah. One could say that when you take a risk, you find out what you believe in. You know, I mean, soon after taking a risk and realizing that no, my motivations aren't enough behind. You know, I'm not robust in my intent to transform the very way that we live, or maybe see the world, or read these control structures that, of course, these two chaps over here are very much interested in exploring, and Danja most certainly too. You know, you can find yourself in a position where you step back and think, hey, you know, I may have gone too far, and suddenly you're looking at the arm of the law. But again, we are not providing we are not out there tweaking ourselves. You know, we're just providing a platform for other people to study this dependency. It's an implementation of distrust. You know, it's all about engendering a healthy paranoia. We see it as a positive contribution that even within a modern democratic legal framework might actually work in our favor. But yeah, it's possible we could end up in jail at some point. Yeah.
In fact, I think a project like Newsweek project, which speaks about the vulnerability of a particular technology or whatever else, lowers an eventual possibility of something bad happening within the frame of this particular technology. By exposing this vulnerability early, you can preempt something really disturbing happening later. So in fact, project like Newsweek, I believe, is very well geared towards fixing this future problems and not creating ones.
Okay, thank you. And is there any question? No one?
Well, maybe we can ask a question.
No, just behind you. One, please.
It's a question for the face-to-face book. Have you thought into making the data publicly accessible, and what would be the legal impact of that?
It's really hard to make this data public because of course Facebook say that is owned by them. So we don't want to risk too much because not because to end up in jail, but because of the lawsuit that may result to be really expensive. So we actually have still all the data. The interesting part is that is in a server in California actually, because it's hosted there and it's really in the same country of Facebook. So they may just call this provider that actually is really cheap provider. They could just call them and say, please delete all our data. And some lawyer that we heard, they say that they can do that because it's also politically embarrassing for them. Because if they ask to delete this data, then it seems that they have the copyright on this data. But it's not true because this data is owned by the user of Facebook. So we are both in a situation that we can't say then we can't say that we can delete or we can keep or we can publish because it's really controversial, even for us, because we may also publish it, but maybe some user is not happy about that, so we may also get we can get sued from users, not only by Facebook.
Yeah, I would only add that the question is who owns your face once is a JPEG on the internet. But it's also important, connecting to the previous question, where you act. I mean, okay, you take risks, of course, in our case quite substantial amount of risk, but it's important to act in a sort of in-between territory between which are the established laws and what is considered like acceptable practice, which is not regulated by laws. So acting in this territory, it's risky, but it means that you are kind of researching what's the current situation that has been defined and codified by law. So that's quite important, beyond all the considerations you can do on the legal threats and the legal position and being brave or not doing this kind of project. That's my humble opinion.
Can I ask a question? Where do you find yourself within the frameworks of Facebook? Where do you find yourself in regard of actually managing someone else's information, like working with the avatar pictures of the users? Because you just said that Facebook doesn't own these pictures and they are owned by the user, whether it is in end user license or in a user agreement with Facebook. It's said that anything uploaded to their servers is technically theirs. And of course, I understand. I think I'm in the same position towards this agreement that it's simply incorrect to expect people giving up their faces. But nevertheless, you are engaging in an activity very similar to what Facebook does. You operate with people's content. Where do you find yourself? Like, what is your position?
Being this data public, I mean, if you take a Facebook profile picture, legally, when you upload it on Facebook, it's owned by Facebook, but after some actions by users a couple of years ago, Facebook agreed that it's also yours, somehow. But legally, on Facebook, it's them. I mean, it's their picture. So I think that we position as in between the two because the data is public. So we position as any other user that can exploit this not really defined situation. So not as somebody taking over it, but as somebody who is showing what can be done in it. And of course, I mean, my personal experience receiving mail of angry people who really were scared by that, scared by being found by somebody else on that platform was also emotionally involving. But I thought it's something that I can emotionally take a step out of it.
Yeah, I may be back to you with the same question, if you feel bad to manipulate the reality of someone else. And as you said, it's a healthy paranoia, right? So we usually say that it was a healthy, shocking therapy somehow. And a detail is that the dating website was not indexed on Google, so we didn't spoil, marriage or families because people couldn't find themselves. They could find themselves only through the art context, the news about this project. So was not against the user anyway. And about taking, owning, not owning, but, I will store this 1 million picture probably forever. And for me, it's just like taking a picture on the street or like in a crowded stadium, it's just people. And I think there is not nothing bad of that. They even agreed on the fact to publish this picture, so it's fine for me.
Well, I agree with you, in fact. Because the interesting moment is that you don't necessarily have to scrape the content, right? You can just browse to Facebook and the pictures will eventually end up in the cache of your browser. And that's, as we said in our presentation, that's the manner of dissemination of digital information by creating copies and not passing on the original. So it's a rhetorical question, in fact, who owns what, I believe.
Thank you. Okay, and is there anyone say something? Okay. Oh.
Hello. Hi, Jamie Zigglbaum. I have a question for Daito and Motoi. Your work particles is really large, and being in that space, it reminds me in some ways of light work from Turrell, or kind of being in this dark room with this luminous material around you. And then there's also the screen or the interface, and I'm wondering how you envision the relationship between the body of the observers and this light sculpture, as well as the interface, and how that fits together in your conception of the piece.
Very difficult question ですね。
He said, so difficult to answer.
What?
He said he will email you later.
Okay.
Let me think about it.
We can talk about it later.
本当に? Okay, is there anything? Okay, is there anyone would like to say something very shortly? Okay? Okay. Okay, it's time to finish. So thank you again for your wonderful presentation, and congratulations for your prize again. And we are so happy to sharing time this time with those winners, and hope to see the next creativity for the next generation in the near future. Thank you so much.